So less of us, I think a third of us left to Mexico. So I'm going to try to be as responsive as possible. So if you guys can just respond with me, it's going to be a lot of back and forth. I wanted to open up today's sermon by asking this question. Have you guys ever lost something, okay, and tried so hard to look for it, but it was there the whole time? When you guys lose something, do you guys go and ask mom for help or dad for help? Mom? Yeah, me too. I asked my dad for help, and he says, go ask mom, right? And then I go to mom, and she's like on her hands and knees looking with me. And as I'm like married now and I have a son, in my own home, I'm the one looking for stuff. My husband, he can't find anything. And so when he's like, is this TMI? He calls me babe, and he goes, babe, where's the scissors? And I'm like, did you check the closet downstairs? And he's like, yeah, I checked the closet downstairs. And then I get upset. And I say, if I go downstairs and I open the closet and it's there, I'm going to punch you in the arm. And then he like runs downstairs and checks one more time. And he goes, oh, I found it. Okay, I found it. Have you ever lost something and you tried so hard to look for it and it was right there in front of you the whole time? This was actually the problem in today's passage. Can you guys guess? What is it that Israelites were looking for that so intently, but they couldn't find it? What was it? What were they looking for? All right. 12th graders. Are you guys here? 12th graders? All right. 12th graders, the 5 of you that are here. What were they looking for and they couldn't find? The Jewish people. What is the conflict in this story? Oh my gosh, okay. 7th graders. 7th graders. What were they looking for but they couldn't find? Messiah. The Messiah? I'm sorry, that is wrong. That is wrong. That doesn't make any sense. Jesus is weeping, okay? What is it that they're looking for? Okay, kind of. That's kind of the right answer, I guess. But what are they looking for that they can't find? Yeah. Their hearts and desires? What? No, that's wrong. 8th graders. What are they looking for? I heard it. Starts with P. Peace. Yeah. Good. And I guess that segues into the Messiah. But what they're looking for is peace. Okay, and this is what they lost and they're looking for, and these people are very, very, very anxious. And they're looking for peace, and Jesus is offering it to them, I guess, because he's the Messiah. He's offering to them, and the Bible says that they completely missed it. Jesus is saying it's right in front of you, and they can't find it. They can't find peace. They're extremely anxious. Now, anxiety is a very hot topic, I think, these days. I think a lot of articles come out about how we're the most anxious generation. A lot of statistics. Did you guys know that in the U.S., 1 in every 3 teenagers struggle with anxiety? 1 in every 3. That means the person that you ask to the left and right of you, between you and the person to the left and right of you, 1 of the 3 of you guys statistically struggle with anxiety. And some of you guys are like, oh, that's me. Wait, that's me. And, we're the most anxious generation just generally, but also even personally, I'm like a very anxious type too. I feel like I'm always anxious about something. I worry about like big stuff these days, finances, like what's going on, in the state of the world. It keeps me up at night and I get really anxious about that. But then I also get anxious about small things, really random things. Like these days, I've been really worried and anxious about Benjamin, my son. He's turning 2 next month. Benjamin's future, okay? And what kind of girlfriend he's gonna bring home. And how he's gonna marry this girlfriend and he's never gonna talk to me anymore. And he's only gonna see me on Thanksgiving. And things like that, right? Like random things make me anxious about the future. Now, anxiety doesn't always look like just worries and fears. Anxiety sometimes looks different to different people. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism, procrastination. Sometimes anxiety looks like, different things to different people. And, being tired all the time. Maybe you just shut down and you don't care. And it's really interesting because anxiety, they show that it only gets worse with age. It starts at the peak when we're teenagers and it gets worse as we get older. college statistics by the American College Health Association said that statistics, one in three, jumps up to 60% in all college students. They feel so anxious that they have a hard time functioning. Right? So anxiety is a pretty big epidemic, especially for this generation. Tim Keller, this well-known pastor, theologian, Christian author, that really talks to urban Christians and Christian skeptics, he boils it down to three things. So, and these three things are kind of the perfect storm to bring us anxiety. Number one is when we have unmet expectations. Number two is when we feel a loss of control. And number three is when we have this voice of condemnation from Satan saying that we're not good enough or comparing us to other people. And so this perfect storm of these three things cause us to be anxious. So the enemy uses this to steal our joy, to cloud our clarity, to exhaust us, to weaken our trust in God. So the big question is, how do we get less anxious? How do we get less anxious? Now, if the opposite of anxiety is peace, the good news is that Jesus promises us peace. And I wish I can just end the sermon right here and say that, the answer to how we get less anxious is Jesus. But it's not that simple. Something about peace is very elusive and is hidden, and we have to seek it. On Palm Sunday, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, he says these couple verses. In the beginning, in verse 38, it says, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest." So the people are seeing Jesus as someone that's going to bring them peace, meaning bring them, Romans, they're a big headache, and just bring us peace, get rid of them. And in verse 41 to 42, it says, "As he," who is Jesus, "approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, 'If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes.'" Jesus is literally standing in the gate of Jerusalem, weeping and crying, not because of what's about to happen to him a couple days later on the cross, but he's weeping and crying because of what's happening to the people. Okay, he's feeling, and his heart is breaking and rending for people because people were so anxious and they were so desperate for peace, and peace was standing right in their midst, and they did not recognize it. The danger of this, of what was happening then, is the same danger that we have today. The danger is that we do the same thing, that peace is right in front of us, but we're missing it. So how do we miss peace? Three things. We miss peace because we define peace wrongly. We miss peace because, we can't surrender control, and we miss peace because we settle on temporary things. So we'll go one at a time. The first one, we miss peace because we define peace wrong. There's a famous story, an old story from a long time ago, about a king who had a castle, and in his castle, he wanted a painting to portray perfect peace. And so he held a kingdom-wide contest of painters from all over to bring their best work that can really portray perfect peace. Now, some of the paintings that were submitted, some of the paintings that came in, were like paintings of like a lake or a very calm, beach, or some clear skies. Another was like a picture of a very peaceful meadow where children and animals were playing together. But out of all the submitted pieces of paintings that were supposed to portray perfect peace, the winning painting was a picture of a waterfall crashing down during a lightning storm. And tucked away in this painting, in this tiny crevice in a rock near the fall, was a small bird resting. So the first one is like the full picture of what won the contest, and then the second one on the other side with the circle, that it's hard to see, but in that crevice is a tiny little bird resting when there is all this water and storms raging around him. And this was the winning painting. Why? Because peace is not the absence of chaos, but the presence of a calm in the middle of it. Peace is not the absence of chaos, but the presence of a calm in the middle of it. In this context today, Jerusalem thought that peace meant freedom from Rome. And that's understandable. If you read the context and you read the room of what's happening, Rome was extremely heavy-handed. They were very heavy on taxes, they were heavy on political alliances, they were heavy on military presence, and they were just really oppressive to the Jewish people. And the day that Jesus was coming into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, which was Passover for them back then, was a special day where hundreds of thousands of Jewish people all came into Jerusalem to celebrate a day when they were liberated from where were they liberated in Old Testament? Long time ago, like there was a huge superpower that was oppressing the Israelites, and they escaped it. What oppressive power was that? Huh? Ninth grade. Egypt. Good. They come together once a year to celebrate their liberation from Egypt. And so when Jesus came, they were celebrating and they were saying Hosanna, and they were saying peace on heaven and glory in the highest, because what they wanted was, how cool would it be on the day that we celebrate our liberation from Egypt would be the day that we celebrate our liberation from Rome. And so there was a lot of tension and a lot of things happening in the air where everybody was getting really excited. So the Romans, they get really antsy. And actually, if you read in the different Gospels, the Romans actually upped their security. They got really antsy, so they brought in more military presence because they didn't want a riot or an insurrection. So it was really stressful and really tense during that time. And what Israelites thought was, man, if we only got rid of the Romans, we would have so much peace. We think peace means freedom from stress or struggle or uncertainty, or maybe even a certain individual. If this individual just was gone, we would have so much peace, or even getting things our way. But Bible says, and we see that people miss peace because we define peace wrong. When we get things our way, that is not peace. That is not even joy. That is actually happiness. And the goal isn't happiness, because happiness is very fickle. When was the last time you got what you wanted, or you crushed the goal, or something happened in your favor? Think how long that happiness lasted. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 to 7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This verse alone tells us that peace is not circumstantial, but it's not even rational, but it surpasses understanding. If you give your circumstances power to dictate if you're happy or sad, that's a very miserable roller coaster way to live. Peace is actually found in a changed heart. So it's not situational, but it's supernatural. Jesus' peace, or shalom, that brings us wholeness, completeness, and alignment with God and with others. That's why some of the wealthiest, most successful people in the world are extremely restless and anxious, while some people who are going through immense suffering or don't have as much in life, have unshakable peace. It is not situational, it's not even rational, but it is supernatural, and it has to do with the presence of God. So we miss peace because we define it wrong. We're looking at it in gaining something in our life or removing something in our life that stresses us out. But we find peace when we define peace as a presence of God's assurance in the midst of our struggles. Next one. We miss peace because we refuse to surrender control. Jerusalem wanted a king to take control, but Jesus came to surrender his life on the cross. His objective and goal was not to become a king for the people and rule for 15, 20 years, but his objective of coming in was to become a sacrifice and surrender his life on the cross. And people wanted Jesus to come and fix their problems. Instead, his objective was to fix their hearts. And we think we'll have peace in our life if we are in control, when everything is going our way. But anxiety thrives where control is idolized. Okay? Anxiety thrives where control is idolized. Peace enters when control is surrendered. And I don't mean surrendered in a very irrational way or to do nothing. I had one student ask me, "I'm so anxious about all this financial stuff I have to do for college. And then, I said, hey, like surrender control to Jesus. And then that student got kind of upset and said, no, what do you mean? Like, so do nothing? Like, you want me to sit on my hands and do nothing? So when I mean surrender, I don't mean in like an irrational way where like you do nothing and you just let everything kind of roll. It means to do what you can, but then in the things outside of our control, we have no other choice but to surrender. Let me give you guys like an airplane analogy. So right now, Hugo is on a plane and they're 30,000 feet in the air, going to San Diego. This is not their airplane. This is just a picture on Google. And they're in the plane right now and they're flying. And let's say all 99 of them that are on the plane feel some turbulence, okay, mid-flight. They're feeling turbulence. And not to expose Pastor Eunice, but Pastor Eunice hates flying. She hates turbulence and she hates like plane rides and all this stuff. So, but let's just say, just for this analogy, that Pastor Eunice starts panicking, okay, on this plane. She's one of the 99 that starts panicking on this plane. And she starts thinking, what if something goes wrong? Okay, what if something goes wrong? And that's why not 3 pastors go to Hugo, only just 1. Okay, just in case, right? We're the designated survivors, okay, me and Pastor Paul. So we only send Pastor Eunice for that reason. And so let's say Pastor Eunice was thinking, oh man, what if something goes wrong? What if this turbulence gets worse? And what if this plane falls, right? Like in the midst of like all this aviation issues and all this like stuff you hear in the news, what if that starts getting to her brain and thinks, oh my gosh, what if this plane is the plane and we fall? And all 99 of us like perish, plus like everyone else on this plane. I don't really like this situation. I don't like how I don't have control. And so let's say that she sitting there trying to endure as much as she can. Elder Sean's trying to calm her down and all this stuff. But then she decides, at one moment in time, while they're 30,000 feet in the air, she decides to go to the cockpit, which is the front of the plane, to fly the plane herself. Okay, let's say she goes to the cockpit and she knocks on the door and says, excuse me, and they're like, well, excuse me, can we help you? And she's like, I just want to thank you so much, right, for being such a great pilot, but would you mind if I please fly this plane? Okay, they would be like, no, right? That's crazy. They would probably have to like strap her to her chair for the rest of the flight. That's crazy. Why? Why is that crazy? Why can't she just fly the plane? Okay, I don't know Pastor Eunice that much, but I'm pretty sure, like 99.99% sure that she's not trained. She's not trained to fly a plane. Okay, she's not trained. She doesn't have experience flying planes. She wouldn't know what to do or where to go. So in that situation, I understand she feels anxious. I understand she wants to be in control. But taking full control wouldn't bring her peace. Actually, it would bring more disaster. So what is she to do instead? She has to go back to her seat, E32 or whatever her seat is. Drink some ginger ale, eat the free snack. And what can she do but to sit and trust the pilot and the crew? Okay, she had to surrender control. And in that surrender is when we find peace. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, it says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Very short verse, but very powerful. Casting requires letting go, right? You can't cast something and cling at the same time. Okay, you weren't made to be the pilot of your life. God is. And the moment that you try to take over everything is when anxiety enters. And the moment you surrender and trust his hand, peace follows. And so we learned in the first point that peace is when we define peace as the presence of God in our life, assurance during this midst of struggles. And peace is also found in surrendering control. Last point we're going to look at is that when we miss peace because we settle for the temporary. And this is, for many of us, including myself, and this might be very helpful, especially as we're going into spring break, and many of you guys will have like more allotted time, and how we use that time and what we really dwell on. We miss peace if we settle for temporary things. So Jesus knew that Jerusalem's peace was very fragile, because it was built on like this political system that was soon about to collapse. So Jesus stood right in front of them, and they didn't see him for who he really was, and that's why he wept. Okay, they didn't see Jesus for who he really was, and that's why he wept. Peace is so elusive and so hidden that we have to seek it. If not, when we are anxious for long periods of time and to survive prolonged anxiety, what we turn to is to self-medicate. These are things like games, foods, friends, busyness, avoidance, relationships, comforts, sleep, etc. These are not bad things. I do all of these things. And the point is that when we are prolonged in our anxiety, we are so tired that we end up self-medicating on these things. During Lent and Lenten season, it's about decreasing so Jesus can increase. Lent is really one of the hardest times for many of us because we're giving something up. And in our cohort, when we were doing Lent this year, we tried kind of giving up different things every week. And some people gave up the same thing for 40 days, and some people did the weekly thing. So this year, I tried the weekly thing just to kind of test what is it that was the most hardest. So we did secular music, we did food, different kinds of food. We did don't shop for non-essentials, and we did media, right? Like social media and like streamings and things like that. And out of all the things that we fasted from, I found that, like, for example, for myself personally, during Lent, the hardest was not watching shows. And the only week that I broke it consecutively, like, without even any remorse, was the 1 week when we were watching shows. Okay, we weren't allowed to watch shows. What was that show? My Life, something about tangerines. Okay, it's like a really sad show on Netflix. Yeah, it was coming out every week, four episodes a week. So I couldn't even binge all of it and then go on my Lent. And so it came out, and I just, broke my fast, and I was just excessively watching TV shows. And that's when it kind of showed in my life, this is a temporary thing that I love to dwell in when I'm feeling very tired or very anxious. 1 Kings chapter 19. This is a story about Elijah. He's a prophet in the Old Testament. And he did an amazing ministry. Okay, he single-handedly did a lot of cool stuff. And after he did all this ministry and he was doing so much, he didn't really see the change that he wanted, and he kind of burnt out. And so in his burnout, he ran away into the middle of the wilderness, and he laid down and he told God he's just going to die. All right, very dramatic. And as he ran away and he's at his wit's end and he said he's going to die, God visits him through an angel. And he doesn't tell, Elijah, hey, get up, do your QTs, okay? Go to church, listen to some, upper room, right? Or some Christian music. Or some, do something that's, generally religious and it'll make you feel better. While he's laying there, and he's just wanting to die, the first encounter he has with God actually is very different. Do you know what happens? Do you guys know this story? Huh? How many of you guys heard this story for first time? You never heard this story before. Okay. All right, guys. Just a general rule of thumb, read as much Bible as you can. Even if you don't understand it, there shouldn't be a single story that a pastor or anyone preaches or you hear on a podcast or whatever, and you're like, oh, I've never heard that story before, okay? At least generally, you're like, oh, I've read it one time. All right, 1 Kings chapter 19. During spring break, read it. Wait, I'm being serious. Why are you guys laughing? Read it, okay? He's at his wit's end. It's a great story. And when he's there and he's just wanting to say that he wants to die and he's so discouraged and he's going through so much in his life, God doesn't kick him and say, hey, wake up and, read more Bible and meditate on me. God actually shows up and he does two things. He tells him to eat and to sleep. He tells him to eat and sleep. Why? Because the journey was a lot for him. And so I'm not saying that the things that we medicate ourselves with are bad things, like taking naps or resting or cooling down. Sometimes we need that in our life. And in this moment, I love it because God meets him and says, take a breather, okay? Eat and sleep. And so he sends an angel to make food and tells him to sleep. But the thing about this story is that it doesn't end there. That is not the end of Elijah's story, where he's just excessively eating and sleeping for the rest of his life. Okay? The story just keeps going. After sleeping and eating, Elijah actually gets up and goes on this journey where he's face to face with God. And read it in 1 Kings chapter 19 and 20. He's face to face with God, and he's telling God very honestly this very somber picture of everything wrong that's happening in his life. Okay, everything wrong. He's like, I gave 100% and I got zero yield. Okay, I got zero return. Everything is really, really bad, and the future is hopeless. This is what he's telling God. And this is why he's burnt out. This is why he's so anxious, and he's running away. And the face-to-face conversation he has with God, God gives him a promise. He assures him of victory. And that's what Elijah needed to move forward. The bread and the little bit of sleeping and the little self-medicating that he was doing, only for the journey that he can come face-to-face with God, so he can receive this promise, this assurance, so that he can move forward. He didn't settle for temporary relief. He moved forward and was face to face with God, and that's where he found his peace. Elijah's ministry actually took a big turn after that moment he had with God. He had strength and hope to go forward, and he invests in the next generation. It's a great story. I really encourage you guys to read it. We find peace when we define it correctly, that it's about the presence of God in our life. We find peace when we surrender control to God, and we find peace when we go through this life and we have to push through the temporary in order to come face to face with the eternal God. Okay, to come face to face with the eternal God. So I know you guys are in spring break and you guys have a little bit more ample time, and that time is going to be used in some way. Whether you like it or not, 24 hours is going to pass. I encourage you guys with this closing challenge. I encourage you guys this spring break to seek God's presence. If there's anything in your life that you're kind of holding on to, I want you guys to give up control. And number 3, don't camp out in the temporary things that you're really into and you're really feasting into, but cut that down and spend more time with God. And so with that, I want us to close in prayer. And I don't know, there was like some